The moderator is not a character but a condition. You do not become order, but you create the conditions to facilitate it. Welcome back. So in my last video I talked very much about the types of journaling that you might want to use and the different sort of purposes and functions that they have. And then I kind of went on a ramble about the systems that exist within us and this idea of having like a moderator. And today I wanted to elaborate on that a little bit more. So like I say, in my last video I talked about the idea of having like these three main systems that all are rooted from a sense of survival. And I discussed the critic, whose job is to make sure that this doesn't happen again in the future tense. Then you've got the protector, and the protector's job in the brain is to eliminate this feeling right now, is to create an altered sense of state immediately and seek immediate relief. And then you've got the shadow, and that's the part of you that were not able to, for whatever reason, were deemed inappropriate at the time and therefore were not integrated. So to summarise a little bit further, for example, the critic might say, it's your fault that X, Y, Z has or hasn't happened because you did or didn't do this. And the critic wants from that for you to learn a lesson. The protector will say, this feels horrible, I think that we should do this, and it'll turn to escapism, it'll turn to avoidance, it'll turn to what it knows best, and it might not always know the best solution on its own accord. And then you've got the shadow, and that's the part of you where you've had a rough day and you come home from work and you don't have a chance to integrate the day because maybe there's something more pressing, maybe you've got children, maybe there's something going on at home, you come home and you can't integrate. It's all the parts of us and all of the memories and experiences and feelings that we have that don't have time for integration, and so just kind of get stored somewhere unintegrated and create sort of internal clutter and mess. And then we'll have the moderator, and the moderator is my idea of like the higher self. But it's not something necessarily that, it's not a person or a character that we become, but a state that we can access with the right tools and the right support. Why? First and foremost, what is the moderator? So the moderator, like I say, it's a condition. It's the prefrontal cortex. It's the part of our mind and who we are that exists, who has the capacity to listen to all of the queries and concerns that are going on within ourselves and create a sense of order, create a system that allows us to navigate and handle these instances. However, when the sympathetic nervous system is activated, we are not in the position to be narrating and integrating our thoughts. The first and foremost priority has to be self-regulation. But if you don't know how to do that, this can all seem really, really hard to access and really hard to reach. So, first and foremost, why trying to be the moderator creates further internal conflict? Effort just equals further conflict internally. When you're already stressed, trying to problem solve sometimes just creates another problem. And that's not to say that as soon as a stressful instance comes up, we should go pause, I need to go reflect, I need to go integrate, I need to take them. Sometimes you've just got to get on with it in the moment. But what I'm saying is that when you come home, it's so important that at some point throughout the week, at least, you give yourself a moment to be really clear and really honest about what's happened and reflect on things that have happened. That's why we vent, that's why we're communicative creatures, we're social creatures, because we need to be able to at some point integrate this into the memory bank and into who we are. So for instance, there's an injustice, you get told off and you don't think it's fair, or someone is just rude to you and you don't think it's fair, and you bite your tongue because in the moment you know that's the best thing to do. But then you go home and maybe you never get a chance to actually like work through it, and it's just grinding away below the surface. The moderator isn't something that you do, but it's something that you become. It's a state of which you can access when the system feels safe enough to stop arguing. So, for example, a lot of people think that the proposal is that I'm suggesting that if you start journaling tonight, you're going to feel better for it, and that's not true. If you start journaling tonight and you sit with your thoughts, chances are you're going to feel worse than you did when you began. And it's in the same way that before a really get into a subject, you know, like when you're venting with someone and temporarily you can actually feel more annoyed, you can actually, because then you start to remember things naturally, you know, once you pay attention to things, more things arrive. Similarly, if you don't give yourself the time of day, however, to sit down at a more convenient time, then it will come to your attention at a really inconvenient time. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, you know, similarly to how your children might come up to you and say, at, you know, 8 o'clock at night and say, sorry ma'am, but I've actually got food tech tomorrow and I'm making spag balls, so like I need ingredients. Because if your son or daughter get home and it's da 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 da, and actually it takes until 8 o'clock at night for you to all sit down and go, right, then of course they're going to bring it up to you at an unsuitable time, because that was the only time that they felt it was practical to bring this to your attention. Likewise, your brain will do the same. Like when you go to bed and you're like, oh my god, when I go to bed it's like I can't switch my head off. Well, yeah, because your brain's been waiting all day for a moment that you're available. You've got to make yourself available to your own thoughts, or they begin to subconsciously maneuver your behaviours and control and predict the outcomes of your life. And well, that's just not on. That's what I mean by, you can't just sit down and start journaling and be like, I am the moderator, I respond, I don't react. Because, like, of course you're not going to. These systems exist for a very good damn reason, okay? Like, these systems have been alive for longer than you have. You know, like, the human brain has been evolving for a hell of a lot longer than you've been learning how to use the system. It knows more than you do. And so that doesn't mean that A, when you have a bad thought, it means that you're just a bad, negative, person. And B, it doesn't mean that, you know, oh, I should just decide that I know best and I should just decide that I'm above it all and pretend that it's not there either. It's a process of real, tangible interactions that you have with yourself that facilitate that integration on a deeper level. Because otherwise then what happens is self-perception becomes self-surveillance. It becomes sort of a dictatorship where you're only allowed to think positive thoughts. And it's like you can start to really critique yourself and get frustrated with yourself because the results that you were promised aren't here. It's not working. You're not working. You know, and so when you're told that journaling makes you a better person and it makes you feel better, but actually all journaling does is make you feel rubbish. And all it does, and you know, writing affirmation lists at first, all it does is make it feel like who you are and who you want to be are tragically far apart. I just want to say first and foremost that is perfectly normal, and that's perfectly okay. And that's not a sign that you're a failure. And that's not a sign that you're not going to be compatible with this process of self-improvement and with wellness and blah, blah, blah. It just means that the stage that you're at right now perhaps was never supposed to facilitate these kind of quick results that perhaps you're looking for. Number 2, regulation before narration. Okay, so narration, that is applying meaning. But you can't apply meaning to something before you regulate yourself. Okay, regulation, that's safety. And narration without safety just becomes disorientation, okay? It becomes a dishonest perception of the world. Similarly to, I don't know if you've seen the video, and we all were made to watch it in like A-level psychology, where there's 2 teams that are playing basketball, and there's actually a gorilla that like weaves between the team, and he's like this massive like mascot gorilla. But you're told before you watch it to pay attention to how many times the ball gets passed from team to team. And like most people don't even notice the gorilla. Like they don't even see it. Like that is so interesting because A, like it's a massive gorilla, and B, because that is your life. Like that is life. And it's not to say that positive thinking and, you know, being honest with yourself is always going to look pretty. But it's to say that perhaps there was more to the puzzle, perhaps there was more to your day-to-day than what you're telling yourself that there was. Okay, maybe you missed something. Somebody else's reality can coexist with yours, and they can both be extremely different, polarising experiences of the same situation and the same interaction, but you can draw 2 very different conclusions and overall experiences from them. So this idea that narration comes after regulation Because if you're dysregulated, your perception of the situation and your inferences of the situation and the experience are going to be very different compared to just even 5 minutes later if you let yourself regulate and then address the situation. So you're probably thinking, okay, so how do I regulate myself? The body is your first point of contact. It's your first call, because this is where I get really excited, because this is where I can talk about my favourite brain region, the insula. So bear with. But the body is your first point of contact. For example, you've all heard it, you've all been told it, and I'm pretty sure that it gets on your nerves just as much as it used to get on mine before I understood why. Take a deep breath. And you're thinking to yourself, are you fucking serious? Take a deep breath. Like, I'm breathing. I know how to breathe. And then you do it exaggeratively and you don't really believe it. And then you actually get more worked up that someone could dare to suggest or propose that your current situation and problem could be resolved through something as ridiculously simple as a deep breath. Stay with me though, because actually there's a lot of truth in it. So what happens when we take a deep breath? The diaphragm, when we take deep, like, belly breaths, like, I'm not talking about shallow, like taking the Mickey kind of breaths, I'm talking like full hipster. You're doing it through the diaphragm. Now what happens then? There's something called the vagus nerve that runs from the spinal cord all the way down to your bellows. And what the vagus nerve is responsible for is your sympathetic nervous system and many other things. But it communicates with the limbic system, aka the survival part of your brain. And it tells it when we're potentially in danger. And likewise, the brain can communicate with the vagus nerve, which can communicate with the rest of the body and communicate when we're in danger. So what that looks like is you start to breathe like this and you start to take really shallow deep breaths. And what that does is that tells the brain, okay, there's a problem, we're in danger, because we're taking deep breaths. We're getting ready to move, we're getting ready to, like, flight, fight or flight. Similarly, when you start to take deep breaths, that rhythm, think about it, is a physical thing. Like, the diaphragm's touching the vagus nerve when you breathe. Freaky, I know, but just stay with me. If it's going like this, it's an alarm system. It's an alarm bell, an internal alarm bell going off within you that's going to trigger and activate an alarm and freak out response. But if you're calmly sort of like tapping, it's calming. So take a deep breath. You've all heard it, and you've probably all been a little bit irritated when someone's proposed it to you, because it feels really out of touch. And I think a lot of the times, unfortunately, people who are more regulated, who actually have a good idea of how to acquire regulation, are dismissed, because ultimately you click on my video and you think, what the do you know? Like, what do you know? If a deep breath is all it takes to solve your problems, my young lady, then, well, your problems ain't as big as mine. And that, of course you're going to think that. And if I'm telling you, like, oh, sit and journal, write about your feelings, it'll make you feel better in the long run, yeah, but you've got to, you've got to understand that there's a larger process. Similarly, muscle release. Unclench your jaw. I've realised by filming that I hold a lot of tension here, and I didn't even realise that I did that until I keep going to put the video on. I'm like, why does my face look like that? Like, I look so unamused and I look so angry. And I do when I'm thinking as well, when I'm like really deep in thought, and I also flare my nose. But there's a lot of places in the body that you'll hold tension without even realising. So imagine if you set the goal for the next week, once a day, you're going to ask yourself, where can I release some tension from right now? Like, can I unclench my jaw? Can I actually relax my forehead? And even if you just think about it for 5 seconds, right? I'm going to unclench my jaw for 5 seconds consciously right now. It starts to build up the habit. And again, similarly, the insula, so I kind of touched on that before and then didn't get into it. The insula is the part of the brain that communicates the internal state and sort of like regulates that with coinciding with your emotions. So when I take a deep breath, it'll coincide with happy feelings, with feelings of calm, with feelings of safety and positive thinking. When I take a really excited breath though, like when I take like a really, oh my goodness, like the insula is the part of the brain that decides whether that's because you're excited or whether that's because you're anxious, and it's the part that modulates and moderates those things. Muscle tension and slow breathing are, I promise you, scientifically proven to release tension and release stress within the body. And that's not just some hipster phrase of like, release the stress within your body, just let it go. Because like, where's it going? Like, no, like I'm someone that I need to understand the mechanism to believe that it works, to then put enough faith into it and actually execute it with enough conviction to maybe possibly see some kind of benefits from it. So I totally understand if you hear these kind of things, like take a slow breath, take a deep breath, and you just feel initially a little bit agitated. That's perfectly fine and perfectly normal. And finally, I wanted to say why the difference between self-soothing and self-sustainment. Self-soothing could be something like, I know I do it and I'll like kind of like rub, like just like massage myself. Like I do it at work all the time, and I'll sit and I'll just like rub my legs, or like I'll kind of sit like this, or I'll squeeze and I'll sort of like squeeze my fingers. And it's exactly the same as like the body as the first point of call, the body as the modulator. Why do I want to keep saying modulator today? The body as the first moderator. And it's embodiment, like it puts you back into your body. Self-soothing might look like that. Self-soothing might look like, you know, taking some deep breaths. And self-soothing might look like, you know, giving yourself a massage, going for a massage like I did yesterday. It was lovely. That's self-soothing, and that has a place. I'm not saying that that's superficial. I'm not saying that that's irrelevant towards your journey to success. And by success, I mean just having a good life and feeling like you're okay. But self-soothing isn't the bigger picture. So self-soothing, it creates a temporary result, and that's great. In terms of, again, like I say, regulation before narration. Where the narration comes in, so where things like journaling comes in, is when you're ready, when you're more regulated. And trust me, honestly, you'll sit and then you'll start a journal, and then you start to feel dysregulated. And then you've got to break. You've got to take a break and take a pause and come back to regulating yourself. Self-soothe. Sit with the feeling, you know, and then go back to self-sustainment. So, okay, now I'm going to revisit it. I've calmed down. I'm going to come back to it, and I'm going to work through it. So, self-soothing is really important for immediate resolution of dysregulation. Yeah. But self-sustainment comes from acknowledging and working through unresolved internal conflicts that prevents future dysregulation, like subconscious dysregulation, that ultimately it takes away from your time. The event, the actual duration that the event occurred within could be quite a short period of time. However, then the duration of time that precedes, where you're still dysregulated because you never have the opportunity to actually address it. Like maybe you're at work and you try not to cry. Like I can tell you right now that I've been shouted at work before when I worked in hospitality, by no one that I was working there with, but by like members of the public who were just annoyed because we didn't have the drink that they wanted or something ridiculous. And like it literally makes you want to cry like in the moment, but you can't because you're at work, and then you've got a 12-hour shift ahead of you, and it's not until actually about 1 o'clock in the morning when you get home that you finally kind of got an opportunity to process it, but not really because you're at work at 10 tomorrow and you need to go to bed. And then it just becomes this catalogue of unresolved issues and unresolved internal conflict. And what happens when that's left unattended to is very much similar to the conclusions that a child who's neglected or abused comes to of themselves, and the stories and the limiting beliefs and the inferences that a child would make from a bad situation, such as I am to blame, or such as, you know, and that's like the critic, or such as I need to find a way to get away from this feeling as quick as possible. So like developing bad habits, so like skin picking and things like that. Like, can you start to see where this starts to piece together a little bit, I hope. So self-regulation it comes in tandem, and it has to come in tandem. By the way, is it tandem or tangent? I don't know. It comes in tandem with self-sustainment. But you can, however, sit down and decide that maybe you're just going to start to write about something that gets on your nerves. So a moment that got on your nerves, and the things that it'll bring up, oh my goodness me, you don't know what's going on in your head. Like, put it this way, but not be that person, but you weren't aware that you were blinking until I just told you that you were and reminded you. You weren't aware that, you know, the rate of which you were breathing, unless you've got a cold, unless something's wrong. You know, it's like internal body parts. You're not aware of your organs unless there's something going wrong. And then you suddenly become aware of them because there's a pain, there's a sensation there. And you're like, oh, I shouldn't be aware of this. The brain is constantly working subconsciously. And there are ways to bring the subconscious to the conscious, therefore to be addressed and to be resolved and to be integrated. There might be beliefs about that you hold about yourself and about the world. Like I said earlier with like the whole like the gorilla video thing idea. And this idea that sometimes the first thing that we see isn't the bigger picture and we'll miss things. It's as simple as that. We're only human, we'll miss things. So as a conclusive point, I think what I'm trying to say here is ultimately let go of the expectation that the things that you're told that are going to make you feel better are necessarily going to make you immediately feel better. You know, think about like runner's high. Like when you first start running, it's not particularly enjoyable. I hate running and I seriously wish I could get into it. And I think if I tried, I probably could. But then I have done a few runs, like I did one park run at the beach, and it was, I'll be honest, it was really good, and it actually completely exceeded my expectations. I thought I was going to hate it. I thought I was going to be nothing but uncomfortable the whole time. When I started off, the only thing I could think about was the fact that the bag I was wearing, which is like a bum bag, was like hitting offers, and it was really getting on my nerves. The other thing I could think of was the fact that I was carrying that obnoxiously large Stanley Cup. But then actually, the further I went, the less that was my conscious concern, and the more that I sort of started to actually get into quite a nice headspace. And I found myself like having like blog ideas, like just having ideas about life and being in quite a pleasant place mentally. The things such as journaling that you're told are going to put you in a better position, put you in a better place. Don't expect the results that yields to be instantaneous pleasure and bliss, because that is an unrealistic expectation. That's only going to cut your nose up to spite your face. Because then what's going to happen is you're going to engage with it. You're going to take a deep breath and you're going to do it half-assed. You're going to go, and it's a deep breath, but it's the wrong rhythm. It's the wrong pace. It's not slow. It's not controlled. You're not pausing at the top. You know, take a deep breath, hold, release. You know, breathe in through the nose, breathe out through the mouth. And if you don't, and if you don't know these techniques, if you don't understand the ideas and the principles behind the things that you're told to do, they hold less significance and the results yield less effect. So thank you for watching, and I hope that served some kind of purpose for you and created some kind of vision and clarity in regards to this process that I've decided that you're going to come along with me for in regards to self-sustainment and self-discovery. And at the core, I really hope that now, if you do choose to sit down and try and journal, that there'll be less self-blame when inevitably it doesn't always yield the results that maybe you were taught previously it would. You know, so if you sit down and you start a journal, you start to take some deep breaths, so you start to practice affirmations. I am strong, I am beautiful, I am brave. And if that makes you feel rubbish temporarily, I hope that there's less self-blame. I hope that there's a higher understanding of perhaps why those things are happening and why that response is coming up, and that's okay and that's normal, and that does not mean that you are incompatible with the process. That does not mean that one day it's not going to yield those positive results. It just means that this is an important part, and actually it's highlighting something that's really significant and really important for you currently. So I hope that you enjoyed that. I hope that you're having a wonderful day, and I can't wait to see you again next time. Bye.